This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. In this season on the podcast, we celebrate that it's Advent. For this Advent, we wrote a book, and the we here is my neighbors in the HEB area today. I am thankful for my book writing partners at FUMC Hurst, Pastor Yvonne and Pastor Matt, as well as Pastor Katie at St. Paul, helped us write a book as we heard Christ's invitation to join our communities and you in moving into the neighborhood. Hey, and welcome to Pod Strangely Warm. Today we continue in this series of conversations looking at how do we move into the neighborhood. I am joined once again by an amazing cohort of pastors from across the Hurst, Euless, Bedford area here in DFW. Matt Ybanez is the neighboring pastor at FUMC Methodist Hurst, and Yvonne Coon is the lead pastor at FUMC Hurst as well. Thank you guys for being here with us today.
Really happy to be here.
Thrilled to be here.
Thrilled and overjoyed and over-caffeinated.
All of the things.
All of the things. Okay. We've been on this journey together, looking at how do we be like Jesus and move into the neighborhood, right? One of my favorite translations of that John 1:14 text comes from the Message translation, right? Where the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. That's what Christ does in incarnation. That's what we celebrate in Advent and at Christmas, right? That Christ moved into our neighborhood. And I think there's an invitation to us to move into our neighborhood as well. Over the last couple of weeks, we've begun to look at what does that journey into the neighborhood look like. And today we continue it with a piece ground in the story of the Good Samaritan. In the third piece in this story is an invitation to come alongside as we come into the neighborhood. First, invitation to see, then the invitation to have compassion, and third, to come alongside. Matt, you are a resident expert on coming alongside. Do you mind kind of getting us grounded in the midst of this? And what does it mean, and maybe what does it not mean? Kind of holding those two things hand in hand.
So when I thought about this chapter for He Came Alongside, the question that really jumped out at me that when I think about the helping, caring, serving mission work that we do as churches is from the perspective of our neighbors, and what is this going to cost me? And the historically the ways that people, churches, nonprofits do that kind of mission work is it comes with strings attached so often. Okay, and so when we talk about coming alongside our neighbors, it's how is it that we are preparing ourselves to invest in significant, authentic relationships that we're willing to walk with people for the long haul. Yeah. And I think that sometimes charity work in particular has the capacity to cause harm, create dependency, and to rob dignity and agency from people. Yeah. And so when we're coming alongside, it's less of what am I doing for you, but what is it that you really need in this moment, and how can I help you to do it? And it's rooted in this. If we look at this first chapter of seeing and opening our eyes to the ways that God is at work in the world around us, where I'm really drawn when I think about neighboring work, it is in the evidence of God's presence everywhere all the time, especially in my neighbors, right? Anybody that I meet, God has already been in and with that person and has gifted them with amazing gifts, talents, skills, passions, things that only they can do in ways that only they can do them, not only for their own lives, but for the glory of God in our communities. Yeah. It's a great testament to God's abundance in creation in my neighbor who I don't know yet. And so when I think about coming alongside, there's I want to help, but also I want to be so aware of what is God already doing in this person's life, and how can I seek it out, notice it, and then really what good neighboring comes down to is how is it that we can activate that in our communities for people that may not have lived into that fully yet.
One of the things that I love as you invite us into this coming alongside is that it's in some ways a challenge to the ways many of us churches have done mission or acts of mercy or acts of charity in the past. Maybe unexamined acts of mission and mercy and charity, right? It invites us to a deeper level of examining our own motives, examining our own actions, right? Because I can think of how many moments in my life with the best of intentions, right? I've put on my white person superhero cape and flown into a situation or a moment or a place where someone's experiencing, struggle in whatever form that takes, and believed that I could bring the quick fix. And part of bringing that quick fix is me having all the agency, me having all of the gift, me having all of the stuff and saying, here you go. Good luck to you, right? And then I get to turn around and go back to my place of comfort, patting myself on the back, feeling good about things, right? And that's not relationship, right? And that's the beauty of the invitation to come alongside, right? It's not that it's really not a shift. And we may continue to do the acts of mercy and mission that we are doing, but it involves a radical shift in the spirit that we bring to it. And sometimes some of the structure involved in it, right? Like sometimes, as you were talking, the image of when we see refugee communities after spaces of worldwide struggle, right, where people are in these encampments, and sometimes in an effort to get people food or in an effort to get people what they need, we'll have especially if it's still a war-torn region, right? You'll have the plane fly over and drop the pallet out of the back with the big parachute attached to it, right? That meets a need, but that doesn't come alongside, right? And that doesn't lead to the transformation that neighboring, I think, can.
Yeah.
Yvonne, as you engage this conversation, your church is one of the first churches to ever have a neighboring pastor, at least in our community and at least in our conference. And so this says that this is a place of deep value to First Hurst, right? It's a place of deep value.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've had to learn how to do is check our assumptions.
Yeah.
Right. So we do have to stop and go, oh, this feels really good. What are we really doing? Because we really enjoy that, oh, I can fix. Oh, I can help. Oh, I can do. And so when we changed our language from for our neighbors to with our neighbors, it was an invitation to check some of those assumptions.
Yeah.
As if, it's recognizing that our neighbors do have gifts not only to offer, but gifts we need.
Yeah.
We are also in need when we engage with folks in our neighborhood. And we don't like to see ourselves as being in need usually. I do think it's a real shift in the way that we see our neighbors, the way we see ourselves, and the way we understand God's already there.
Right.
What does God have for me in this? And I think it's really powerful.
We aren't bringing Jesus with us. We are encountering Jesus already present in the community, right?
Right.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. Before I was here, before you were here, right?
Christ was in the
already
neighborhood.
there.
Right.
Already there.
Well, and I love at the end of Matthew, right, the sheep and the goats passage, the one we like to ignore sometimes because we feel judged by it or whatever, right? But when Jesus says to his disciples and to those gathered, right, when you did this and you fed those who were hungry, you clothed those who were naked, you're like, that we encountered him already, right? That comes with it the powerful proclamation that Christ is already there. We didn't bring Jesus with us, right? It's the same idea being lived out in a different way. That Jesus is there, and our journey, our goal is to go find, right, not to bring.
And that adds such a layer of importance to he saw.
Yeah.
Right? Opening our eyes and becoming so aware of the ways that God is already moving in the community around you, and it begins with awareness. It really does to call that back.
Right.
It begins with an awareness of what God's doing and how God's present and
Because
celebrating it.
there's a reason this comes third, right? We can't come alongside if we haven't seen first, right? We can bulldoze forward with our blindfold on, right? And we might run into some stuff. We might knock some people over. There might be hurt, harm, or trouble along the way, right? But to come alongside is a different expression.
Right.
And that's what we see the Good Samaritan do in the story of the Good Samaritan. That's kind of our grounding scripture for the book and for this entire journey, right? We trace, when Jesus is asked, who is my neighbor? He doesn't actually answer the who is my neighbor question. He gives us a window into what is a neighbor, right? And how can we be a neighbor? And
it's unexpected.
Yeah.
It's the wrong person.
Yeah. It's not the good religious folks.
Right.
It's not three preachers sitting in a
It's
podcast
that guy.
studio doing right.
Yeah,
It's
it's
that
that
guy.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that calls back this idea that for neighboring and really this concept of asset-based community development, which seeks to recognize the gifts that are in the community, right? So this idea that God's already out there doing work, and we're blessed to be a part of it. This idea is that if God's already out in the neighborhood doing good work, and we're going out to discover and seek and find, then it's more likely that the neighbors who are living in the community around our church have better ideas and better solutions to their problems than we could ever come up with. So we think, as churches, a lot of times, especially as part of, and I'll just name part of, our history, is we see a deficit and we think, well, we can solve that problem,
right?
And so we go and we try and do it and solve the problem, and it's a really direct way for the ways that we might solve problems. But our neighbors, they're in it, they live it every single day. And they probably have a better idea of what would be helpful than we do.
And sometimes a clearer understanding of what the actual problem is.
Oh, yeah.
Right? How many times have we, with the best of intentions and the best of hearts, ended up creating a problem just so that we can solve it, right? Or maybe launched into what we think is a fix and wondered, why is no one here? Why is this not making an impact in the way we thought it would or could? Mm-hmm. Well, because we didn't have good ears to hear. Right, we didn't come alongside. We bulldozed forward in our own way, on our own path.
I've taught neighboring in various places, and one of the examples that I use comes from the book Toxic Charity, and they name, they give this crazy statistic that more than half of the wells that are dug in Africa by nonprofits and churches are no longer functioning within 1 year of being built, and so they begin. So if we're going to examine those outcomes, well, okay, why is that happening? Well, you can find the obvious ones, right? There's they didn't leave behind the right parts to be able to fix and repair. Okay. They didn't train anybody for how to make those repairs if they remembered to leave parts behind. There was nobody in the community left behind who was left responsible for the well to make sure it would be maintained and upkept. In some examples, they talked about how the community wasn't even made aware that a well had been built.
Oh man!
You think about the kinds of relationships that need to happen there. And so I taught that for a long time. Yeah. And I mentioned that in a conversation with Reverend Daniel Reeves, who's at Project Transformation Central Texas, and he's Congolese, and he goes, besides all that. The people of particularly in the Congo where he's from have a sacred connection to the water and to the river. And he said, because those places are sacred, they're not going to leave the river to go find a well. And there are so many layers to and how would you ever uncover that in a week-long trip? Right. When you show up with all the tools and the parts and say, okay, we got to get the work done. Yeah. And so it really, it is an invitation to deepen the relationships and the connections, to begin to let our neighbors to speak into what it is they really want to see change and be different.
So we don't know all the things.
Oh my gosh.
We really don't know all the things.
Well, and we're not going to know all the things, and I think part of our culture is to want to do, right? We're action oriented people.
We're human doers.
We're human doers, not human beers, right? Or that's not it. It's beings, right?
It.
Well, human beers. Well, human beers? I don't know. But yeah, that we have to pause some innate drive within us as U.S. Americans, right? We have to kind of hit pause on something that's been kind of culturally bred into us, right? Mm-hmm. See the problem, fix it. Don't ask too many questions, just get it done, right? In service of relationship, in service of sustainability, in service the many of the things when we come alongside, we're not seeking the quick fix, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeking the long-term solution that leads to thriving within the entire community.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. What's the quote you used in the book? There's a fabulous quote that you lift up.
It's from Lilla Watson, who is an Aboriginal rights activist. Okay. And her it's attributed to her, and she doesn't actually claim it. She says she got it somewhere else. If you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. If you've come here, but if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
It's recognizing that I'm not here to fix you.
Right.
I'm here because we need one another. Because the way God really works in the world, the way my abundance is tied to your abundance, my everything about my life is tied to how well your life is doing. That's powerful.
Well, and that's the withness
It
that
is.
we're talking about here, right?
It is.
You talk about helping the church make the flip from ministry for people to ministry with people. I think y'all are a half step ahead already by having ministry for people, right, rather than ministry to people, right? How often do we end up in a space where ministry to people
We
is
just
the
keep
thing?
adding letters. 2, 4, with. What's one that's 5 letters? I don't know.
Working on prepositions. It's
Right. we need Kristen Worthen here, right? She's going to get her doctorate in prepositions and Jesus and how they come together. But that withness is powerful. And when we think about the relationships in our life that have been most transformative, those moments where we have found ourselves in need of support, we found ourselves in need of care, we found ourselves in a position where we longed for someone to come alongside us, right? What has been most transformational even for us, right? It is when people come alongside and are with us in the midst of suffering in whatever form it means, right? We spent time in the previous season of this podcast with Dave Brower and with Joy Dister Dominguez talking about the issue of theodicy and humans and evil, suffering, and death, and how often what we get offered in the midst of a moment of suffering is the quick fix theological phrase, right? Just those little phrases that just make you nuts.
God has a plan. God has
everything happens for a reason, or like these kind of things that I think again come from a place of best intention, but are unexamined, right? And they're quick fixes. They're like, oh, just drop your grief, drop your suffering, drop your hurt. It's okay, because we'll give you this flippant thing in response. How often are our unexamined, well-intentioned engagements in mission and charity and mercy, the lived version of everything happens for a reason.
God, I think it was Andy Root, who was a youth ministry writer years ago. He used to write about relational youth ministry. One of the things that he wrote in his theological foundational piece was this idea that our best intentions are always undermined by our unexamined motivations. Right. And so if you get into that kind of a conversation, and even if it's related to missions or neighboring in some kind of way, I really, for example, like what in this idea of what's the quick fix? What can I say right now that's going to help me exit this conversation, this place of discomfort, as quickly as possible,
Exactly.
right? And so my best intention is to say something helpful, but the motivation right now is that I'm not really willing to be in this pain with you right now, right?
Yeah, this feels icky. I don't like this. You don't look happy. I want to make you happy, so I'm gonna give you a platitude, and we're gonna be fine,
right?
And then we can go back to just being happy.
And a lot of our mission work it emerges in the same kind of way.
It does.
It emerges in the same kind of way.
Yeah.
So would you say coming alongside involves self-examination and awareness of those unexamined motives, and also maybe a subjecting them to the greater need and to the relationship? Like saying, to use our platitude thing for a second, right? I'm uncomfortable and I want to get out of this moment of discomfort, right? If I becoming aware of that's important, right? But then also setting it aside and saying, I want to do this, but instead I'm going to sit with you, not with the answer, but like I'm going to set my motive aside, even after I've examined it, in service of relationship.
Sure.
At the end of the day,
the coming alongside is absolutely a willingness to move from a place of comfort for me to a place of safety and thriving for all, right? And that's a concept that we're exploring in our Neighbor Well curriculum that we've built with the Project Transformation with Lynn Rhodes and Beth Stike. But this idea that that in order that for all people to have a place where they feel safe may not necessarily mean that it's comfortable for all people. And if I take seriously this call to come alongside my neighbors, then I've got to be willing to enter into a place that perhaps makes me very uncomfortable and is very unfamiliar, but yet creates safe space for somebody to be who they are as a child created in the image of God.
As you guys have been doing this work, right? We're in the beginning stages. This year has been one of our strategic focuses is to begin the process of neighboring, right? Because we've been a very mission-oriented church forever, and that's been a part of our identity, right? That's part of who Martin claims to be and is in many ways. But we're the baby that's trying to get their knees working on crawling, right? At this stage, and I know y'all been doing it for a couple of years. As you reflect on this experience of coming alongside, where does this meet real life for you guys in your lived experience at the church? Where does it meet real life for your faith community? Where does it meet real life for South Hurst, where you guys are rooted and grounded as a community?
Well, I think we need to start with a little bit of honesty here.
Okay.
We're still learning.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? We've got the reaction, right? We still will automatically go, what can we do to fix? We're just leaning into what it means.
Okay.
And so you're going to go through this too. All of us do. But
Yeah.
We step into a space and then we've got to step back and go, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing? What are we learning? Is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? And so we will do some things and we do well, and we're going to do some things and we don't. And so, we've had another church come into our building.
Okay.
When we had all the rains back in end of October, their roof collapsed on their sanctuary and they didn't have any place to worship. And so we kind of moved some things around. And so they're on our campus worshiping, and it had to displace a few things. This is neighboring. This is opening our space, not us telling them what they need, them telling us what they need, and being willing to make those compromises. For the most part, we're with that.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
But there's some discomfort.
But it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily comfort. Their worship style is different from ours. They're a completely different denomination, and so there's a little bit of discomfort. So we're still learning, and we're trying to figure out how to practice.
Yeah.
This study is actually our hope that we get into it a little bit more, that we take advantage of that.
We celebrate small wins.
Yeah.
Right? There's this idea, and we got this from the neighboring movement and the Good Neighbor Experiment, which we did a cohort a couple of years ago with a small group from our church. This idea of being free to fail, because the outcomes for neighboring are so vague. And so when you share that with a room of people and say, hey, we're going to try this concept of neighboring instead of missions, they want to know what the outcome is. What is it? What am I going to do? Right. And how do I measure it?
Yeah. How do we count it?
The neighboring outcomes are really vague because first you got to create the relationships, and then you got to listen. Yeah. And your neighbors are the ones that are speaking into what are we doing, and then how do we do it together, right? And so it's the wins are small. You celebrate them when they happen. Yeah. You baby steps, and you move in the area of least resistance. And the relationships with our schools. I don't know if it's our congregation. We've got a lot of educators and retired educators in our community of faith. Working with our schools seems to be the area of least resistance.
Yeah, I know for us and for both now and at previous stops along the way, that invitation into that space of neighboring has come first through schools. And I don't know if it's institution to institution, like if there's some extra layer of comfort there, like we can go in and it's got established hours and we can meet with the staff and with the family. I don't know if it's what it is that makes that for many places a first step that is simpler, but it has been. And I love the invitation to let it take some time, because it's going to take time either way, right? Yeah. We can either get mad and hit our head against the wall, or can not acknowledge that this is going to take some time. This is going to take some intentionality. And
it's not only going to take some time, but we're not in charge of the outcome. That's the story of our faith, right? Yeah. When I say that I do believe Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior and put my whole trust in God's grace, I'm saying I'm not in charge of the outcomes, that I'm going to let God be at work and let God decide. And that's really what we're learning how to do, is how to be people of a much stronger, more authentic faith. Yeah. To trust that God's there, that God's inviting us, that God's at work, and you and I don't get to figure it out ahead of time.
Yeah, the invitation to trust is wholly different in this space. It's not just about believing, right? Not about checking the right intellectual boxes off, right?
Right.
It's a subjecting ourselves in many ways, right, to the work and grace of God, where we let go of the outcome. Matt, you share in the book a powerful story where one of those small wins for your student ministry, where they were looking at how do we come alongside our neighbors at Christmas time, right? And you know the thing that so many churches do, right? The Christmas tree where you go buy gifts and Secret Santa for kids who may or may not have a Christmas otherwise, right? Y'all reframed that recently. I'd love for you to share that story with us if you would, because that is one of those. As I was reading, I'm like, this is an amazing small victory, and not the only way to rethink that kind of a process through a spirit of neighboring, but a powerful invitation and one example that might be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, to kind of preface it, I've been a part of the Christmas program where you go and you buy the gifts and you get the food and you go and you, oh man, this a 12-year-old would really love this, and the little sister, she would really love this, and you go and you pick it out and you really enjoy and have fun doing that, and you go home, you wrap the gifts with your family and you get everything, and then you get to go and you swoop in like a hero. You go knock on the door, say, hey, here we are with the Christmas gifts, and Merry Christmas, and we hope you have a blessed season holiday. And the when I became painfully aware of the possible harms created by that kind of ministry was when I was standing in a living room and we had delivered the presents and the food, and I became aware that the father was home but did not want to show his face, and he felt a tremendous amount of shame that he was not able to do Christmas for his family in the way that he wanted. And I realized in that moment that my presence was not helping, and was more likely causing harm. And so I'm just gonna I'll own it. We got this idea from somebody else.
Perfect.
So it's not my idea. Like I said, we're gonna try this as a concept for neighboring. And so what we did was we asked our congregation to donate the same toys and the same money that they always donated for the Christmas program that we did at our church. We used to call it the Bel Air Shopping Spree because of our relationship with Bel Air Elementary down the school or down the street. And so what we did, we asked everybody to donate all the same toys that they did. We asked Mission Central, which is a nonprofit down the street from us that operates in the neighborhood. We asked them to share a room with us, and so they did. We opened up a Christmas shop inside of Mission Central and invited our neighbors and said, hey, these gifts are here. They're available at greatly reduced prices from retail, from where you would go get them at Walmart or Target or wherever. And we invited people to come shop. And at first, a lot of our community partners were very hesitant. They were like, wait, you want them to come buy presents? You're not just going to give them for free, right? There's a knee-jerk reaction there. And so we weren't sure if the schools were going to communicate it or if people were going to show up. And to our surprise, people did show up to the Christmas shop on the first Saturday to come shop. And the first thing that we noticed was the joy of a mother getting to choose the gifts that she knew would be perfect for her kids. And so now you've taken that's gone from my joy in guessing what a 12-year-old might like to her joy in knowing what her kids would like. Right. And you've taken that now, you've restored that dignity and agency from me back to the person who really needs it in the first place, or is who it's been taken from. Right. And so that joy, right. And that was a celebration for us in the first week. And then, we also knew in the back of our minds that, somebody who was really pretty smart could come figure out that they could come get toys here really cheaply and then just turn around and flip them on Amazon. Right. And I just got to own, that's my own narrative created. Exactly. Cynicism. But second week comes around and sure enough, I see a lady come up who I recognize from the first week. And all the narrative begins to form in my head. And thankfully, shame on me, because she had brought back some of her neighbors that she knew needed to be there. And while they were shopping for gifts for their families, the God moment was when she decided to hop behind the counter and start helping to gift wrap gifts along with our volunteers. And the conversation became lively. People were laughing and sharing Christmas stories together. And she was having such a good time and saying how much she loved it. We realized that she needed to be a part of our planning team for the next year.
That's awesome.
And so now, as we begin to invite other community partners and individuals from the neighborhood to be a part of this, it's something that we hope becomes a community thing and not a church FUMC Hurst thing, right? And with our neighbors who are using it, speaking into what it is and what it becomes. And that's sort of once again, our neighbors know how to solve their obstacles perhaps better than we do. And that practice of creating a relationship opens the door to what those possibilities could be.
I so love that. And I so love that you went there and were willing to tell us where it began, right? Because how many of us have marched into somebody else's house with our Santa, pretending to be Santa Claus, throwing our bag of presents over our shoulder and going, look at us, we're amazing, right? And the stated intention is to make sure a kid has Christmas if they might not have it otherwise, right? The unexamined motive is I want to feel really, really good about myself right now and feel, nobody wants to rob a dad of dignity, right? That's not
not at all.
Not the examined or unexamined intention, right? Or motive, either one, right? But it becomes about us, not about them in that moment.
Well, I don't think it started that way.
No.
I think we really believed that we were seeing a need and really felt like we had a way to respond to it. And so I don't know if it was so much that we went, well, what's going to make me feel good about this, right? It's, oh my gosh, these children are not going to have anything to open Christmas morning, and my kids do, and I want to make sure they do. So, I mean, it
comes from
really
a good place.
does come from a good place. It's just stepping back far enough to go, what is another way?
Yeah.
That I could help make this possible, and not just to make myself feel better, because I'm going to feel really bad if your child doesn't have something for Christmas. And I don't want to feel bad.
Right. Well, and as people hear this, right, we may be pretty far in to, we're 3 weeks into Advent at this point, right? Your churches have probably already done, if they do the blessing tree, they've already done this. And so the thing I would add to this conversation is if you hear Matt's story and feel a little convicted and are beginning to wrestle with how might we do this differently, but you're already 80% down the line, the simplest shift that we have made in my churches over the last 5 years to begin this process is we make sure we partner with parents so that we deliver gifts on like the 22nd or the 23rd to the parents. Like, and it is as subtle and as, it's like you get to be the superheroes for your kids. I'm not coming in with all the I am coming to give to you, and then you handle it from there, right? And that's not perfect, right? I think the Christmas shop is way better, but it's still it's a step that takes us out of that role of I'm going to swoop in with all the kids around and be, Mr. Superhero, right? Even if that's not the original intent, right? But it gives us a way to say, parents, we want to have you have the power and the dignity to say, you can say if this is from Santa, you can say if it's from you can say it's from whoever. You can look at it and go, good trying to pick for my 12-year-old. I'm going to go swap it, right? We give it to people in enough time to allow that, right? And it's again, it's not perfect, but it's a step toward that. It's a small win on the journey. And so if a church is hearing this and going, man, we're 80% down the line on this, what do we do?
Don't cut it. Honor the work people do and the heart and the passion they put into it, and let it marinate. Some of the stories of my small wins are conversations that I had with people that I ultimately marked as a failure, but then after a year of marinating, changes begin to happen. And so just sit with this and reflect on it for a while.
Amen. Matt, thank you so much for your wisdom. Yvonne, thank you so much for your wisdom and for sharing with us as we all seek to be good neighbors in our neighborhood and come alongside those who are in our midst. Next week, we'll continue in this conversation looking at how do we expand the community even more broadly. But until then, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this is Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even